welcome back. This is Beetle Beast. We're going to be going today on leg 3 of our journey from Elum, Washington to Grant County, Moses Lake, Washington. Originally, we kind of had this planned out that we would be doing leg 2 was actually going to go all the way over to Moses Lake, but we added this stop here in Elum because the time on that first flight was going to be a bit long. So this time around we have it should be a little shorter. It says it's about an hour. I think it'll be a little less than that, but I'm taking the 172. Got a little bit of a jog down here to get around some of the terrain that's a little bit higher in a direct flight path. Either way, it's still not particularly high terrain. Hopefully the video works out well though, because it seems as if there's been some optimization changes inside of Flight Sim, which have been causing some stutters in the recording. So hopefully that works out well and we're able to get that figured out and it actually records well this time around. But I have tried it once before and I had issues with the recording after the fact. So we're going to try this again and we'll see if this one works or if I've wasted another hour of my time. So hopefully it works. Hopefully whoever the heck watches this, if they do, will actually enjoy it. And I'll hop into VR.
Departure to the west.
Alright, so the winds here are out of the west. The winds over in Moses Lake are also out of the west. They've got a big long runway over there if you're landing to the north and south. But the one for the east and the west is a little bit shorter, but that still shouldn't be too much of an issue. Alright, brakes are off. Start increasing our power. Looks like the winds are almost right down the runway according to the windsock. Airspeed's alive. There's about 55 knots. Start pitching up. And clear the obstacle, let the airplane accelerate to about 79 knots. Enjoying all these bumps. And we'll start making that left-hand turn. So the initial course out of here is going to be off to the east, and then we're going to end up going just a little bit to the southeast. Enter a downwind leg here. I believe it was runway 28. But we're going to end up going just to the north of that hill that's straight ahead of us. And then we'll kind of work our way down the valley before making our turn back towards the northeast, which will help get us closer to Moses Lake. Should be a pretty good VFR day for flying out here, so. Go ahead and pull these flaps up. And we'll try to set it up for just a little cruise climb. See if it'll climb at about 90 knots or so. Getting some wind off of these hills apparently. As the airplane kind of bouncing around a bit. Wind, some thermals. So since this is leg 3, we're now at about the 10 o'clock hour leaving out of here. The idea, of course, is to fly until we reach nightfall, and then we'll start it over again that next morning. So that's going to be my plan. But yeah, the first time and I'm not sure what's changed here. I think I see here. I built the PC before I ever took a video of this or tried this one on a video. But my first two videos come out incredibly smooth, and then this most recent one has come out. It was incredibly, not bumpy, but stuttery. The audio was good, but the video was having some issues. You know, it's kind of funky. I've got a, right now I have the performance data for the PC up. It shows I'm getting 72 frames per second, which is good. It's what I'm expecting. But we're only using 30% of the VRAM from the GPU, and my CPU is not being tasked too terribly high either. So I know that there should be plenty of overhead. I've turned the settings down a little bit to hopefully help the performance here. But we'll see. Hopefully that'll work out. So the last time around, good gosh, we're getting some wind here. Airplane's just bouncing all over the place. The last time I flew over here, I did it at about 5,500 feet, and I think I'll do the same thing today. The weather, like I said, is pretty much non-existent. There's no reason to really fly low. I could actually, even at 5,500 feet, go direct over there. We could just avoid that turn. You know, I think I might. Maybe we might just go straight across the mountains. Because we definitely have the altitude. That's not going to be an issue. We might just have more bumps, but heck, we're getting bumped around already here. Alright, there's 5,500. I'll try to hold her level there. Start leaning that mixture out a bit. So I can get this airplane to stop climbing. So one of the things I kind of commented about last time I was making this video and attempting to, since I started this project, there have been several more force feedback sticks that are coming out on the market. I'm really interested in that. The one that really kind of piqued my interest was the one from Moza, just because I currently have a Moza racing rig. It sits right next to my flight sim stuff, so I've been really impressed with the force feedback they have for their steering wheels. And it's a great little hobby and pastime to play around with when it comes to driving. You know, taking a little break from life to make some laps at your favorite racetrack is always a good time. So that was one of the things that, you know, kind of, I don't say piqued my interest, but when I saw Moza was coming out with one, they've come out with a flight stick base that is providing you force feedback, and I think that would actually make a major difference with this in terms of attempting to trim it. If you're trying to trim the airplane to fly straight and level, much of that is done by feel. You get the airplane flying level, and then you can relieve some of that back pressure, whatever you're putting in on the yoke. And I think that could be huge for flight sims here in the future. So I'm really excited that that possibility exists. Haven't decided if I'm going to make the purchase, but I think I need to make some type of upgrade over my current HODAS, my X56, which I love. But it does have some issues, namely that it's developed some ghost inputs on the throttle, which can create some problems. And it tends to happen, it seems like, when I start making lots of throttle movements, but just every once in a while a button will activate and you'll end up with the gear or the flaps moving. I've noticed it more in DCS than I do in Microsoft Flight Sim, and that's probably because the flying that you're doing in DCS, I'm often moving the throttle around. I'm moving I'm changing weapon systems between air-to-air, air-to-ground mode, so I'm doing quite a bit of work with the buttons on the throttle side of my HODAS that I'm not doing in Microsoft Flight Sim, because basically once things are kind of set up here, I'm moving mixture with one throttle with the other, and then I have another wheel that's set up for propeller if I'm flying a complex airplane. But for the most part, the buttons just kind of stay where they are. The power lever kind of stays where it's set, especially in something like a Skyhawk where it's almost always at full power. You know, I've got to pull it back ever so slightly right now. And obviously, like I said, I've pulled back the mixture just a little bit, but for the most part, it's everything kind of stays pretty steady. So yeah, so the last time I was a little bit further south there, and that was the path, of course, that gives us the most headroom between the terrain. But up here in the valley, actually, is a little bit better looking view. I kind of enjoy being in this position a little bit more. I'm still not an expert at all on that silly GNS 530. Like I said, I will figure it out. We have a lot of time to do so. I will make sure I get on that at some point here, but can't tell what's going on there. Might be another valley or something, or it's just you know, some funky stuff going on with the sim. It looks kind of like a rock formation of some sort. So yeah, I'm going to attempt, though. I should be able to still do a direct 2 here when it comes to... Yeah, we're actually almost at the turn anyway, so it won't make much of a difference. But if I go direct... There we go. Oh, it didn't go. Activate. There we go. Look at that. I figured something out. And there's no message yet, but I will bet it's going to be closer to there. See, I should probably turn off the silly wind and thermals in this thing because some of the pitch attitudes are annoying. If I was in a real airplane and we were getting quite this much of variation in pitch, which I've probably dealt with when I was younger and flying Skyhawks all over the place, my guesstimation is I've probably dealt with this, but I don't know. It feels, maybe I'd be getting a little bit queasy if I was getting bounced around quite this hard. So as of right now, let's see if we can find out exactly where we're at in terms of distance to go. Yeah, 40 miles. So not a terribly long way to continue on, but we should be there soon enough. I think the last time around it ended up being about a 38-minute flight. The winds might be a little bit different than this time, or for this time. But yeah, we'll see. So my plan here when we reach the airport, we're going to probably fly down to pattern altitude, end up in a left base. They have a runway that lands out to the southwest. I think it's like runway 21. But that'll be my plan, just to send down and we'll land there. And that should be pretty straightforward from here on out. But like I said, I do like this route a little bit better terrain, a little bit more interesting to fly over. Some more wind turbines way out there in the distance. I had made a thought, or I had a thought, I guess, of making a change though on this flight. An eventual change, I guess you could say. So I had purchased the Beechcraft Bonanza, which of course is a significantly more capable cross-country airplane. So I have one of those. I had talked about potentially seeing if there was another Cessna out there, because the majority of my single engine fixed wing time has been in Cessnas. A lot of time in the 172. I have a little bit of time in 152s. A little bit of, no, not a little bit. I've got a decent amount of time, I guess, in a 172 RG. But I mean, I'm, somewhere close to probably almost 1,000 hours in Skyhawks in general. Something close to that, not quite 1,000, probably about 800 hours, 700 hours in Skyhawks. But I've always had a thing for the 177 Cardinal, so I did look just recently to see if there was a Cardinal on here, and there is not, sadly enough. It's a really cool airplane. It'd be great if someone modeled one. I've always thought it's an amazing looking airplane. You have a real big cockpit door that goes really far forward. You had the ability to get into the back seats very easily. The big stabilator on the back of them is pretty awesome looking. A big moving tail, back there. The instrument cluster is also kind of neat. It had a larger instrument panel up here in front of the pilot, and then a little kick down on the side where the passenger would sit, giving them a little bit better visibility. A really raked out windscreen. Obviously, it's a strutless airplane, and if you were able to get one that was a modified airplane with, say, the 180 horse engine, constant speed propeller, that would be phenomenal. And if you match that with an RG, as a 177 RG Cardinal, those things look the part, and they're just they're a really cool airplane, and be a great little in-between cross-country airplane. I did see, though, that they do have a 182 RG, so I thought about that as well. Like I said, I've got a lot of time in those airplanes. However, one of the thoughts was, okay, maybe halfway across this flight, maybe after we get out of Colorado, when the terrain gets really boring and I'm not going to want to spend ages at cruise zipping across. I think I'm avoiding most of Kansas on this flight. I think we do hit through Arkansas. We might make it across. I don't think we make it across Missouri. I think I'm going to stay a little bit south of that. So I think we'll hit through Arkansas and then into Mississippi before hitting Georgia and working our way down into Florida. But did I forget the entire state of Alabama? I probably did. I probably forgot the entire state of Alabama. Either way, as we work our way towards the south, so once things get really kind of, honestly, boring, I might switch it over to the Bonanza, unless someone has another airplane that they would recommend me trying out, because the Bonanza is cool. It goes fast. I think it's about 150, 160 knots. For cruising, you've got a complex airplane, so you're dealing with the propeller, you've got the gear, and you monitor, of course, manifold pressure, etc. It's a really good model. And then that could even turn into a little bit of a review of the airplane. It flies well. Obviously, I'm still without any type of force feedback stuff, so I don't know about that, but it does fly really well, and it's like I said, it's a known cross-country airplane for people. And specifically, that's cool, and specifically, it's just known as it's just a very capable all-arounder. So I think that would be a good airplane to give a try with. All right, so the terrain has obviously dropped down quite a bit, so we're gonna go ahead and start a descent down. I'm gonna pull the power back ever so slightly. Keep the engine from going over red line. Should have flown through that valley right there. Heck, I think we will. Just watching the speed. Could have made the longer turnout, but you know, I hadn't done that, so here we are. We'll zip down this for a second. The terrain has done some funky stuff up there as the topography's trying to catch up. And yes, this is not something you do unless you're one of those guys who likes to get violated by the FAA. And I am not one of those guys because I do rely on my pilot's license to make a living and to pay for me having a computer and VR headset and all the other toys and stuff that I have in the house, plus the, you know, I've got family support, as you heard me chatting with my wife earlier. All right, moving on. It's still kind of cool looking, I like the topography there. Another 27 miles away. Looks like about 2,500 feet will be our pattern altitude when we get over a little bit further here to the east. But I think we'll maybe just cruise on over at 3,000 for the rest of the remainder of this before we land at Moses Lake. So yeah, so this is kind of what I anticipate some of our other legs of flying kind of looking like, and there's just not a lot of interest. We got some power lines down there. Those are always fun. Try to avoid those. That is the world's longest building. The size of that thing. There's also a few things I noticed up here in eastern Washington that are just kind of funky. There's a couple of fields that I flew over where they had terrain data that looks like it was registered as being a building, but it's one of these big round flying saucer looking irrigation fields, similar to that one there. But the terrain data registered it as being a building. So there's this structure that's kind of in the middle of it. It's not the irrigation farm, I would assume, unless it registered it multiple times as it was moving. But it's obviously, you know, I don't know, 75, 80 feet high, it looks like, and takes up half the field. So I thought that was kind of funny looking, unless somebody's hiding something in their irrigation fields they're not telling us about. But yeah, it's kind of neat looking. Just some cool things that they can try to fix, hopefully, for 2024. I'll also be curious to see if 2024 ends up being a little bit more optimized for VR. The current version it works, but it's not great. In order for me to get better performance here on it, specifically it's with the DLSS, the way it creates the textures, you lose clarity on glass cockpits, glass screens. Luckily I don't spend a ton of time flying in glass airplanes. I just have to deal with this. You know, the 530 has that glass refresh rate, and it just kind of gets this funky blurriness to it. The instruments actually come out really good, really clean, and they're actually a little bit better if I use it in TA or if I upscale it some, which I might change for the next one, because I know that it can be kind of annoying if you're watching the video not in VR. Well, you're not in VR, but watching the video that's been recorded in VR and having to see the instruments probably aren't as clear as they could be. And that is one of the drawbacks, you know, of VR flying in general. You lose out on some of that clarity. I would be curious as to, you know, how some of the better headsets, if you're on a Pimax, like a Crystal Light, which is a strange name for a headset, considering it should be a T, I think, or a Lemonade. But, you know, it's I'd be curious what something like that would actually look like as far as clarity goes. Even a Quest 3 I think would be kind of fun, but I've heard that, of course, the Quest 2 does have issues with Microsoft Flight Sim, and I'd be kind of curious if we'll see the same thing with the Quest 3 if the optimization for Flight Sim isn't all that good, even though it works really well with quite a few other apps. Like I said, I have a Mozo racing rig, and I spent a lot of time on that with Assetto Corsa, and I've modified some of the files for Assetto Corsa. I've picked up a few of those, and they have some phenomenal mods. But even more than that, they just have really good visuals, and it looks really good even in the headset. It doesn't max out the system. It's optimized well. It's a very old game though, but it works really well in VR. And you'd be thinking that this game, obviously being significantly newer, only 4 years old at this point, would work well in VR, but I'll be curious to see if that ends up being more of a focus for Flight Sim 2024, considering the number of users out there, who've adopted VR headsets. It's simply a far more immersive way of flying the airplanes around and feeling like you're in them. And the detail that they've included on these airplanes is it's phenomenal stuff. I mean, everything from the textures to the way the screws look. That's actually one of my complaints about the Bonanza, and we'll talk about that when we actually fly it. But the textures in the Skyhawk here, the Asobo airplanes, is really good. The cockpit looks as if you could reach up and touch it. It reminds me of being in a Skyhawk. If you were using this to supplement your flight training, I think you'd feel really good about it, because everything's right where it should be. The view of the airplane and the feel of it, everything looks right. Sounds right. Obviously, it's a little quieter than being in an actual Skyhawk without headset on. But if you had an A&R on, you'd be perfectly fine. An active noise reduction headset. It'd be very similar to what you'd hear here. You're going to hear the roar of that engine. There's going to be, of course, more vibrations that you'll get, which some of that could come through with some bass shakers. There are ways to increase your immersion with the Flight Sim, but it's a pretty solid way. And I think it would be a very good training tool for the vast majority of people who are attempting to pursue a flight license, pursue their private pilot license, or if they're specifically where I thought that the former versions of Microsoft Flight Sim really excel was if you're trying to practice instrument procedures. I mean, learning how to get a scan down when you've got a six-pack in front of you that you're able to look at each of the instruments. You can work on your OBS. You can shoot your ILS approaches down to minimums every time, and do so without putting yourself in any danger. You don't have to worry about you fly the airplane, fly the MISC, get familiar with it, get familiar with setting things up, where knobs are, where things have to be moved at. Like I said, that's one of my complaints about this airplane is I don't use the 530 very much, and I have no real exposure to it. When I was young and in flight school, those things were incredibly expensive, and the only people that seemed to really have them were people who were really well off, or they were putting a bunch of money into their airplanes. Flight schools typically didn't have GNS 530s in them, and definitely not the 530 430 combo that you see shown here. That was kind of like the dream avionics to have. The Garmin G1000 was just coming on the scene at the end of my flight training. I mean, just barely making an appearance. And when I was flight instructing, the school actually very briefly had gotten a G1000 aircraft on loaner while I was instructing. I never got any time in it. I went out to look at it once and go, ooh, gee whiz, it's pretty. But that was the goal, humorously, of course, that was the early 2000s. The goal at that point was to get these pilots ready for the type of flying they would experience when they get to the airlines, the type of avionics they'd experience, these advanced avionics system. And the G1000 stuff they were doing was honestly more advanced than the majority of airliners. And I say airliners because the majority of graduates, when I left, ended up at regional airlines. It was more advanced than the aircraft they were flying at the regional airlines. And the thing that tripped up student pilots who were transitioning typically from, not student pilots, but new pilots at the airlines, you're transitioning from a Skyhawk that goes around at 120 knots. You're flying at 2 miles a minute, and suddenly you're flying an airplane that does its approach at 120 knots at minimum. So to think faster than the airplane that you're flying is the skill that is developed by pilots with experience. That's how you develop. You develop it by flying faster airplanes and learn to get your brain to think ahead of yourself. Because if you're sitting here trying to react to the airplane the entire time as opposed to knowing what the airplane's doing and where the airplane's going, you will always be playing catch up. And when you start getting into more high performance aircraft that have significantly higher ground speeds, they have higher approach speeds, they have higher stall speeds, getting behind the airplane will cause you problems. And that's what was basically the majority of our pilots that were failing training. It wasn't because of a lack of glass cockpit experience or even trying to manipulate the autopilot, but it was trying to do all of those things while trying to figure out where the airplane was at the exact same time. And what they needed to be doing right then was flying the airplane. And that's just the way it always goes, you know? Fly the airplane first. And if the automation's confusing you, you can turn it off and fly the airplane. So, we're getting pretty close to Moses Lake. Town's over there to the right. You can see the lake, of course, over there to the south. The airport's directly ahead of us here. I think when I turned my visuals down a bit, the clarity had decreased some, so I'm not seeing things as clearly as I would like to. I do see the reels on the end of the runway. They're flashing. So we're going to aim for midfield, which will be just to the left of those. We'll overfly the airport, set up in a left downwind. And then we'll be landing on the runway that goes over here to the southwest still. So like I said, I believe that was runway 21. But runway 22 it looks like. But that'll be our plan because there's a 4. Runway 4 is one that's approaching according to the GPS. So that's what we're going to do. I can see 4 straight ahead of us there. Over there to the left is 22, and then I think that's 18 over there on that side, which, if memory serves right, is the longest runway, but not one that we're going to need. So we'll get down to about 2,500 feet. Mixture's going rich. Alright, yeah, there's the big runway. Like I said, winds were out of the west here, so I think the landing 22 is going to be our best runway choice. So we're going to overfly midfield here, and I'll just make a left down, or a left traffic pattern, so we'll enter the left downwind for 22. Still love the way these hangars here, some of them that end up being absolutely gigantically tall. It looks so incredibly awkward. Hopefully that's something else that Microsoft's able to get fixed for Flight Sim 2024, because some of those just look a little funky. And not some of them, they all. If you see the hangars, they start looking like that. They look kind of strange. Alright, so here's our downwind. So the way we always used to set up for these, we're going to put that runway about halfway down the wing spar. Then when we come abeam our landing point, we're going to pull our power back to about 1500 RPM, and we'll let it slow down as we get our first notch of flaps in. So if we're aiming for the 1,000-foot markers there, that'll be fine. Set our power back. 1,500 will be fine. Don't want to go too low than that. Remember, you don't have a constant speed propeller, so it will, as you slow down, that engine's going to slow down. We're below 110. Get our first notch of flaps in. Trim it up so that it'll fly at about 85. And we normally started our turn when we're about 45 degrees when the airport, or the runway's about 45 degrees behind us. We're just going to go ahead and let the airplane start coming around. onto our base leg, which is going to be rather short as we're not overly far off. Right now, I will say we are a bit lower than I'd like to be. We will put in our next notch of flaps, though. Yeah, we're actually not that bad. I'd like to be in gliding distance is what I was going to try to say, but we're looking okay right there. Speed's good, distance is good, coming in on final. So they got a little airplane sitting off to the side here. And we're aiming for about 65 knots. I have not added any power. I could have put it in about 1500, but we're actually sitting a little bit high, so that works out. Get our 30 degrees of flaps in on the path. Pitching the airplane. Nope, it was not an airplane. Winds are right down the runway, that's good. Right on the glide path. Doing about 65 knots without making any change. We've got the field made. Go ahead and pull our power back to idle. And then the key there was always try your best to keep the airplane from touching the ground. As long as you did that, you'll end up with something somewhat smooth for a landing. Alright, so there we go. We have landed. Airplane's kind of doing its own thing for taxi. I'm trying to keep it straight. As soon as I find a good place to make a nice left turn, we're going to turn off this runway and we'll consider this leg done. So hopefully you guys were able to enjoy my terrible commentary and the bumpiness of my head movements for this hopefully short 45-minute flight or so. I'm going to try to optimize my VR settings and hopefully this video comes out well. If so, stop back by and as we continue on this flight down to Florida, I would love for you guys to continue on going with me on that journey. So thank you guys for watching. Take care and safe flying and happy simming to you guys.